Your session is titled as Outlook for Global Mobility of Talent 2021 and beyond, with a focus on USA and Canada. I would like to introduce session moderator, Mr. Manjunath Gokre, a dear friend of mine. He's a managing partner, attorney at law, Gokre Law Firm. Manjunath founded Gokre Law Firm in 1999. Manjunath assists firms' clients on all aspects of employment-based immigration, including non-immigrant visas, J1 waivers, EB5 investor visas, permanent residency, audits and regulatory compliance, consular assistance, and family-sponsored migration. Manjunath's clients include investors, doctors and medical practices, hospitals, universities, IT and software development companies, and manufacturing companies. Manjunath takes pride in his commitment to customer satisfaction. He's active in ILA. He has served for 2 years in the ILA Liaison Committee to the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services Ombudsman Office. Currently, he serves as a member of ILA's Liaison Committee to the Vermont Service Center. This is the 4th year on this committee. Manjunath is a Juris Doctorate from Georgia State University, hold MS in Environmental Engineering from Clemson University, South Carolina, and BS in Civil Engineering from Bangalore University, India. Manjunath, welcome. Take it away.
Thank you, Ani. Thank you for that very kind introduction. Welcome, Ambassador Blay, and welcome, Philippe, to this panel. Our panel is titled Outlook for Global Mobility of Talent 2021 and Beyond, focus in USA and Canada. Ani, I would like to at this time introduce both our panelists, Ambassador Blaise and also Mr. Chatillon. Ambassador Louise Blaise is Canada's Consul General in Atlanta, Canadian Consulate in Atlanta, which covers North Carolina, South Carolina, Tennessee, Georgia, Alabama, and Mississippi. Ambassador Blaise was Canada's Deputy Permanent Representative to the United Nations in New York from 2017 to 2021. She has also served as the Vice President on the UNICEF's Executive Board. She has had a very long and distinguished career with Canada's Department of Foreign Affairs and International Trade since 1996 and has served in postings in Washington and Paris and Tokyo. Ambassador Blaise serves on numerous boards. She is very committed to advancement of women entrepreneurship and leadership. She brings a very unique governmental perspective to our discussion. Welcome, Ambassador. Thank you very much for joining. Next, Mr. Philippe Chatillon is the Global Vice President of Strategy and Business Control for Randstad. He has international experience in leadership roles in operations, finance, and he has worked with global companies, including Technicolor, Thomson Ferguson, Control Data, and also the French Air Force. He has over 35 years of experience in the industry, and he brings a very unique industry perspective to our discussion. And I really look forward to our discussions with Philippe. Welcome. Thank you for joining. Ambassador Blaise and Mr. Philippe Chatillon, if you would like to add something that, I'm sure I missed mentioning quite a few things from both of your long, illustrious resumes and careers, please feel free to speak for a few moments about yourself and your mission. Ambassador Blaise first.
Good afternoon. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you so very much. I'm sorry, I have 3 screens in front of me, so I have to get to the right button to turn myself the volume on. I'm delighted to be part of this conversation. I really do believe that talent mobility is very much at the forefront of how we're going to, I think, face some of the challenges and opportunities ahead of us. I'm looking forward to talk a little bit about the Canadian experience, which I'm very proud of. I think Canada is at the forefront of this issue. I think we have one of the best models of immigration and talent retention, and as well as education. So I'll look forward to talk about that. I also will be bringing in a little bit of my UN multilateral experience. I have a really global view and what we have going around the world, and how we're going to go about also leaving no one behind. Because as we build our talent, as we recruit that talent, we also have an opportunity and a responsibility, I think, to make sure that we do so in an equitable way.
Thank you, Ambassador. Mr.
Yeah,
Chettilong?
glad to be with you too. I have to say I have the privilege to work for the largest HR company in the world, Randstad, and we do know how important, in fact, it is to have the right talent in the right job. And we know also, and we are going to talk about it today, how it's difficult to get the right one because we don't know where they are sometimes, and we need to retain them when you're able to find them. So I think when you look at the full chain from the onboarding, in fact, at the beginning of their working life, just after technical college or university or school, to in fact their ending professional life, the landscape has changed tremendously in the last few years on both sides, on the employer side, on the market side, but also on the expectation from the talent, which means that company have really also, in fact, to think forward about how to retain, motivate, on board. And I'm sure we'll talk about that, but through the pandemic, we have seen, in fact, what does it mean in terms of maintaining the cohesive approach, team working together, when people have, on one side, a hybrid model, working from home, working from, in fact, the office, or in some occasion, in fact, losing their workforce. So glad to be here with you.
Thank you. So without further ado, I think we can go ahead and delve into our discussion. But to get started, I would sort of like to set the stage for this discussion. Over the last 4 years, as you all know, we have seen significant challenges globally when it comes to movement of talent and resources. And in the US particularly, we have seen inward-looking policies taking effect. And there was also a weakening of support for global trade, multilateral treaties. Companies with significant investment in the US were facing roadblocks in their ability to move talent and resources in. While these winds of change were blowing globally, we also had the COVID-19 pandemic hit us. That was a double whammy. This further complicated the situation. So I want to explore your perspectives on US and Canada as a region, as a whole, and how both of you view the outlook for our region for 2021 and beyond in terms of the movement of resources. Mr. Philippe, to you first, what do you think have been the challenges the companies you all work with have faced when it comes to specifically the movement of resources in the last 4 years into North America from all other parts of the world?
There are many aspects to look at it. I do believe one of them is definitively the landscape has changed. We used to have a pretty stable understanding about the marketplace from a company point of view and from a resource point of view. In the last 4 years, we have seen change, acceleration change, like geographical change. We see company moving from the north to the south of the country for the United States, people moving north to south, people moving and company from the west to the east side. So your resources are moving all the time, and this move are motivated by many aspects. It can be, in fact, cost of life for individual, cost of doing business, maybe less presence of union in the south for manufacturing company, you name it. But also because I think there is a growing part of, I would say, cities like Atlanta as a good example, in fact, which are really international based now. And when you look at those international companies and people moving here, you can now, as we know, reach 80% of the population in less than 2-hour flight, and you can go to Europe in less than 8 hours. So the dynamic are changing definitively. So that's based on the infrastructure. But for me, what is more relevant, and it's been accelerated by the pandemic and COVID, is a scarcity of talent. That's in fact the question number one in our industry. We do permanent placement, we do temporary placement. It's so difficult, in fact, to find people. I would say that couple of reasons behind that. We have baby boomer phasing out, in fact, from the working population. And we do know that in the last 15, 20 years, we have less knowledge transfer from generation to generation. So you're having a disconnect now on the marketplace also between an adequation of having the right education for the right job or not having the education. And if you do not have it, you can be excluded, in fact, from the working place. And the only way to get it is to be either reskill, upskill, but it's not for everybody. So H1B has been one of the way to balance this lack of knowledge. Of course, from one administration to another one, it has been more difficult. The denial rate has been increased. It's going much better now. So there are some level you can use with, but definitively the mobility is based for me on the skill, hard skill definitively, but also the soft skill, adequation with the culture of the company.
Thank you, Philippe. Ambassador Blaise, would you like to jump in and sort of like set the stage for us as to Canada's role in terms of welcoming talent into North America, given some of the challenges US has faced, and how Canada be complementary to US. So you please add your views to it.
With pleasure. There are as close, let me just take a step back, as integrated and as close as we are, Canada and the United States, in terms of our economies. And, because it's been 30 years plus of free trade agreement, we have truly integrated our supply chains. But where we probably have some differences is in the area of education, skills management, and the big one is in immigration. In Canada, we have now a global skills strategy that's been put in place, building on years and years and years of active talent attraction by our country. We have a point system by which you can immigrate to Canada. But in addition to that, we have put in place this global skills strategy, and we're targeting very specific occupational groups that we are in need of in Canada. And so this strategy has made it easier, faster, and for applicants to enter Canada. And we have an over 90% approval rate. Now compare that to the United States, it's a completely different landscape. So we are active at welcoming the talent that we need. We also have programs when they do arrive to make sure that they're successful when they come in. We couple that with a very aggressive student recruitment process. So we have some of the best universities around the world, some of the best educational institutions, and we really do go out and attract that young talent. And once they're here studying, we make it easier for them to stay once they graduate. And I think that's been enormously important and has made it easier for us to meet some of the challenges, even of COVID. We're a population of about 37 million, more or less, and we are now welcoming over 400,000 immigrants a year. That gives you a little bit of an idea. You just look at the city of Toronto, for example, about 50% of the population was born outside of Canada. So this is we have made a decision collectively as a country to really live a modern iteration of the Canadian dream, which is really that we are a multicultural country that welcomes immigrants, and we really, really fundamentally, it's become part of our core value that we see diversity as our strength, and we see the benefits of it for our economy. So I'll end there, and I'll be happy to expand a little bit later. Thank you.
So sort of as a follow-up to that, I think this question lends itself well to where you ended. So do you believe in your role as the Ambassador, Consul General in Atlanta, do you see any effect on the inward-looking policies we have had in the US on interest in Canada, or even the policies in Canada, or if Canadian policies have sort of been independently charted, if you will, with not a lot of consideration for what's happening south of your border. I mean, just if you may want to articulate on that, I would really appreciate it. Yeah.
I'd be happy to. We when we renegotiated NAFTA, now we call it USMCA, it was a modernization of a trade agreement that was working extremely well. One of the areas that we did improve on, and we did bring in the digital economy into the agreement, because during NAFTA, this just wasn't a part of the economy, so we needed to do these things. But one of the areas that perhaps we could have done even better on is in the issue of mobility. I think that we are as integrated as our market is for the flow of goods. It has not been quite as integrated in the area of the flow, making it easier for talent to move back and forth. And just recently, just during the pandemic, just to give you an idea, it was extremely difficult. I spoke to a lot of the Canadian companies that are operating huge investors into the US economy, who were having difficulties bringing in really high-skilled technicians to come in and do repairs to some of the machinery that was needing repairs. So this is not permanent immigration. This is really about a technician getting on a plane, because he or she is the only one that can actually repair this very high-level machinery, who weren't able to come in a timely fashion because they had to apply for an exemption under the COVID border policy. So we're quite happy on how well we work together, Canada and the United States, to manage the pandemic and manage the border, and the flow of goods did continue, and it's overall a success story. But there are areas in which I think we probably could have done better. And certainly when it comes to the movement of talent, this is something that I think is still on the table and will need to be looked at moving forward. And I'd be interested to hearing from Monsieur Chatillon on the issue of, are we going to start to talk about if somebody could be sitting full-time in a country, for example, let's just take an example, in Canada, and working full-time remotely for an American company that does not have, let's say, an office in Canada. So not incorporated in Canada. Are we getting into a world where the technology is making that possible? And as you were saying, Mr. Chatillon, you were talking about the labor demands flexibility now. They want to work remotely, some of them not in the same city as their employer. Are borders gonna disappear for the remote workers, or are we going to continue to face some immigration issues and taxation issues and so on and so forth? Or is there an opportunity, or is this a challenge moving forward for governments and societies?
Yeah, thank you, Ambassador, for highlighting this point. I do believe the digital work is changing, in fact, the way we approach the work. It's about now, when you look at how do you find talent? You find talent today through platform. And what is a platform? Digital platform, it's a mix of a human approach with a machine approach, which is an algorithm. And if you look at the US base as an example, you have 73% of independent contractors who are subscribing or belonging to a platform to find a position, wherever is a position. You have 50% of the temporary worker who are registered in a platform today. And you have 35% of people looking for a full-time position, what we call direct hire or permanent placement, who are also looking through the platform, which means that the geographical impact of where is located the company, where is located the job, in fact, in an office, is, I would say, much less important. Of course, not in a manufacturing approach or R&D if you're in a lab, but for any type of position which can be managed on remote, either working from home or working, in fact, from any place in the world. So I do believe it has consequences in terms of competition in the country, in terms of salary. How can you be competitive in the United States when you are offering the same skill than one provided in a different country where the wage can be 3 to 4 times lower with the same level of education. Big question mark here. So how do you protect also as a country, in fact, your own population, your workforce, you maintain locally, in fact, the ability to people to make a living, and at the end, where do you want, in fact, the value of the company and the people go to the GDP? So we can see a lot of financial transaction going also one way or the other in terms of spending. That's for me one of the impact of the digital world. The other one, we see large corporations who externalize more and more their human resource function. They go to recruitment process outsourcing for the people, so they externalize, in fact, all the onboarding abroad, and they want also to have a single point of contact to manage their workforce when it's an external workforce, you know. So it's what we call the MSP, you know, the management system provider. So companies are trying to, and I took more for the larger one than the wholly owned company, are really trying to focus on their core line of business, on the delivery to the stakeholder, by large, when it's not only to the shareholder, and where are the people in the game. That's very important, because that's how you make value, that's how you create, in fact, a culture, how you build the trust to make sure you continue to grow the business. So managing company from a conceptual point of view, or more and more on the digital world, has a huge implication. And we saw that between the COVID time, where managing people on remote and team to keep a cohesive approach, in fact, of your workforce is a real challenge. There are the tools available for that, but it's still a challenge that company has to adjust. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chatillon. So sort of to pick up on Ambassador Blaise's question and your response, in my practice, I see many of my clients telling me that if we are unable to bring resources into the US due to visa challenges or COVID-19 kind of challenges, the work will flow from the US to these other destinations, be it India or elsewhere. Would you like to sort of like, I guess you were alluding to that. Would you like to comment on that? I mean, are we going to see more of a diffuse workforce, you know, in the future, where it really doesn't matter where people are located, as long as you find sort of the right skills for the job, you'll get it done where the company will get it done wherever the resources may be found? I mean, or is that where we are heading?
Well, that was really sort of my question. I think to a certain degree, I predict that there will be some of that will happen. It will have to happen, because what I'm hearing is exactly what Mr. Chatillon was saying. There's a real problem with the availability of workforce. Everyone that I speak to down here in the Southeast is saying that they have a problem recruiting. And it's not even just skilled job. We know even low skilled jobs, or they're having a hard time bringing people in, even if they're increasing their wages and so on and so forth. We're hearing that workers are or employees are becoming more and more demanding of conditions under which they will work. And so that's, you know, logically that will probably make the sort of the marketplace do what it has to do to get that talent. And if it has to get it from abroad, while the person stays abroad and because the visa problems are there, then that will happen. But I want to say that there's still, let's not underestimate the allure and the appeal of North America as a place to immigrate. Canada just really obviously does offer a great environment in which to work and grow and build a family, whether it's universal healthcare. Yes, I know it's a strange concept. It works for us, but really we have these kinds of the social safety net that provide high degree of public education to our children, healthcare, reasonable retirement conditions for Canadians, and so on and so forth. Now, there are challenges even in Canada now. We're not immune to some of the trends that are affecting other developed economies. One of them right now is inflation, rampant inflation. in some of our cities in Canada, it has become more expensive to find housing. And so we have to work on this. But as of today, I'm very, I think it's pretty safe to say that Canada is still a very attractive place to immigrate, and the numbers demonstrate that fully. So in the short term, probably we're okay, but I think we should be mindful about that deepening of that trend in terms of shortages of labor and having companies take the shortcut to get to what they need to function.
Philippe, is there something you want to add to that?
Yeah, I do believe, if I'm looking at much broader level that Ambassador know better than me, it's in fact how you manage also geopolitical risk, in fact, to run a company. And we have to keep in mind that the attraction of North America by large is based on the value of the democracy and what we bring to people in terms of freedom. And this cannot be replaced by any financial impact. I do believe it's still a huge I would say asset to attract talent from the world. There's no question about that. If I'm back at company level, as you said, Ambassador, the expectation is rising at the talent level. It has been rising for financial point of view, the pay rate, definitively, but more than that, the new generation, I would say, and is looking for really purpose, value, where they are. In fact, it's not only in fact being able to get a salary and a long-term, in fact, expectation to grow with the company, but what is my value, what's my purpose, what do we do? Are we really, in fact, engaged in diversity, inclusion, and more now coming, in fact, what your company is doing for carbon footprint. So I do believe that you retain people now on values in new generation, which I'm very delighted to see, because I think that it's a nice way also to a company not only to have a financial purpose and value with a shareholder, stakeholder, but really, in fact, to consider the workforce as a partner in business, but also a partner in a balanced life and equity down the road. So we should see, in fact, those two forces joining together. But I'm very pleased about how much the new generation are willing, in fact, to participate in a community life, in the company life from a social point of view. Yeah.
So to pick up on something Ambassador mentioned, in terms of attract North America, both of you mentioned that it is still a very attractive sort of geographic destination for people from other parts of the world. But sometimes, given that US has been a bit of a challenge for some time, we also see a lot of interest in Canada. We see that through our India office as well. But sometimes what we hear or the feedback we receive is a lot of times Canada is used more as a stepping stone for eventual entry into the US. Is that a fair sort of like assessment, Ambassador, or is that changing given what Philippe mentioned, that people are really looking for democratic values and how welcoming the environment is, and maybe it was a thing of the past where people would really use Canada as a stepping stone, but maybe not in the future. I mean, there are, if you want to comment on that.
Yes, and I remember it was probably 20 years ago when in Canada we were talking about a brain drain. We weren't being competitive enough and keeping and retaining some of our best minds in the area of scientific research, for example, and so on and so forth. They were being kind of poached and coming south of the border. That trend is not completely ended, but it is far less of a factor than it used to be. In the areas of innovation and R&D. Canada has really, really invested a great deal of resources. And a lot of scientists and some of the best minds in the world are finding that it's quite a fertile ground to advance their research. A lot of, if you look at just the Nobel, not Peace Prize, but the Nobel Scientific Prizes, a lot of them are given to at least dual citizens that hold Canadian citizenship, or foreign scientists who actually work out of Canada. So just goes to show. But I mean, since you've asked me the question, I will add the fact that I think more and more, if you were to ask at least Canadians and potentially many Americans, probably they would like to see a thinner border between Canada and the US. They'd like to see it be at least between our two countries, because we have so many similarities, so many different. Yes, we have different specific. What's the word I'm looking for? Rules and procedures, but we at the forefront, we have the common law, and we have very, very similar ways of operating. So I think companies and the workforce would like to be able to move more seamlessly between our two countries in a way that would be profitable for them. Now, I'm not going to, I'm not speaking on behalf of the government when I say this, but I think you're more and more the young generation that Monsieur Chatillon was referring to as part of their value-based system. They're becoming really well established in their own community, but they also have a worldview. And you know, they also they tend to travel more. They tend to, COVID aside, and I think they tend to value having less restrictions to those movements and being able to have access, being able to work both sides of the border. I think it's something you would find would be extremely popular if you were to do some polling on this issue.
So I know early on in the discussion you mentioned USMCA replacing NAFTA. NAFTA was almost 30 years old or even older, and USMCA is more in line with the digitalized economy we have today. Do you believe, Ambassador, that we will see, and you also mentioned that there is an aspiration that our borders should be a little bit more freer in terms of movement of talent and resources, north to south, south to north, across the US-Canada border? Do you think the USMCA would facilitate some of that? Is it set up or designed to accommodate some of these newer aspirations, newer requirements?
You have some what we call, it's not specifically USMCA, but you have it was part of the old NAFTA. We have some NAFTA visas that are available. There are small, but on the mobility front, USMCA, as did NAFTA, are only tinkering at the edges. It's not a full revamping. It doesn't go anywhere near close to what I was describing in terms of we've facilitated, consultants being able to move back and forth and do work on both sides of the border. We've done some of that, but it's not a complete revamping of the mobility issues between our, you're still going to be, you're not that much better off being Canadian trying to get a visa down here to work permanently, whether it's an H-1B visa or not. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's my understanding that being Canadian gives you maybe a few visas that are specific to Canadians that can apply under specific conditions, but overall, other for work consideration, there's not a great deal of specificity to the Canada-US bilateral programs to speak of.
Yeah. Philippe, one of the, this is to sort of like change topics. In my work, I did mention that companies with significant investments in the US were facing roadblocks when it came to bringing people from overseas into US to work in their operations. So given that, we would get inquiries like, why can't we be in Toronto, or why can't we be in Vancouver and still do business with in the US-Canada as a region, because Canada is, like Ambassador mentioned, same values, common law, same time zones, English speaking, similar culture. Do you see that happening? I mean, in my practice, I've seen inquiries, but I'm not really seeing it happening. But I would be curious to hear, because you probably interact with a lot more companies and their requirements. What's your take on that? I mean, do you feel that trend is continuing or taking off?
We see improvement.
I will say this, I think it goes back to what I was saying earlier. I think all the free trade agreements that we have, consecutively, I can't say the word, but that we have negotiated with the United States have made it a lot easier to trade goods across the border with low to zero tariffs. So it's been a great success from that point of view. When it comes to labor, not so much. We still have a lot of, I think, impediments to the movement, the free flow of that labor, and for a variety of reasons, and some of them quite valid. But at the same time, I think now in this modern world where the digital age is moving faster than perhaps then we can respond. I think we are probably, and it's always really difficult to measure missed opportunities, where you say what could have happened but didn't. It's a lot easier to talk about what you've lost that you had. But when you want to be ambitious, sometimes you need to have ambitious policy. And in the area of labor, that'd be one of them. You compare us to the European Union, who has been able, basically, if you're a citizen of France, you can go work in Belgium without any impediment whatsoever because of the European Union agreement. And this is not what USMCA is, clearly. We have a border and no Schengen area here. You have to show if anything, over time, in many ways, we have thickened the border for the movement of people. And part of that was really the terrorism threat. And unfortunately, since September 11, we have had Canada has fought the erroneous impression that the terrorists came through Canada. They didn't. They did not come through Canada. They came directly to the United States and were given visas here. So, but there was a sense, because there was an attempt to cross the border. At some point, there was an arrest made out on the West Coast, and that just, the narrative became after that the border has to be protected at all costs, and that played into, I think, the actual mobility of people, not just for leisure, but also travel for work. We also, a little bit, our collateral damage, if I can use that little bit of that provocative expression, for what's happening in the southern border. The border between Canada and the United States is not a porous border. This is a very, but I think most Americans, when they think of the border, they think of the southern border. And so what you tend to hear more about is, a wall, more law enforcement, more, you get into that negative mindset of people entering the country. And that Canada has to be patient, and then we have to understand, because we're lucky, we're blessed by geography, we're surrounded by 3 huge oceans, and then we have the United States below us. So we really don't have the same problem. But I think because of that context that has made the argument of a free movement of people between Canada and the US a little bit more of a dream as opposed to a full reality.
I think, Ambassador, from my practice and from where I sit, I do see corporations and businesses understanding some of the challenges, and they understand the values of Canada, and They understand the value of the geographic proximity of Canada to the US. And I do see inquiries. So I would like to ask both of you if you're seeing, as a result of that, any increase in trade activity, not so much from US with Canada, but from outside with Canada, partly because they want to be nearshoring to US, if not, if we are not in New York or Seattle, it's okay if we are in Toronto or Vancouver, that kind of logic. Do you see that playing out? Philippe, you want to comment on that?
No, as I said initially, I see that within the United States about the geographical move from the north to the south, to the west to the east. Regarding the Canada, I cannot comment because, as Ambassador said, in fact, in the workforce approach, we're pretty standalone country. But I see through our international clients, very good cooperation. So question, what I do believe, in fact, to continue to increase mobility from outside of the United States, Canada, coming to the North America side, it's in fact to facilitate all for, and I'm talking for the United States, the H-1B process, no question. But it's not only about the job, but it's about the family, how you welcome the family together. Most of the time, it has been in the past very difficult for the partner, the spouse or the husband to find a job because you need a separate work permit. I do understand that it's been recently very facilitated, but behind providing a position, it's in fact how you welcome a family and give the opportunity, in fact, also for a few years, even if we know H-1B is not an immigrant visa, to establish yourself and to have a life balance for the family in the same time that you create value, in fact, in the business world. It's a very difficult balance to reach, but I do believe that it's going in the right direction. I would just put one disclaimer. I would like to see more, I would say, positions which are not only based on degree, master degree, PhD for H-1B to be recognized. We need people with strong skill, technical skill, some manual skill, which are highly valuable, in fact, for the country. And those people should be able also to join force to help us, in fact, to grow America. I know also that, in fact, there is a revision at the time on the minimum wage by job category for the H-1B, which could be potentially a limitation for bringing people in the country. I do understand that it may not happen before 2023, but that's something to keep under the radar. Yeah.
Yeah, and perhaps I could just do a hot pursuit to this and then come back to your original question with just a few numbers. But on this, I couldn't agree more. And I want to say that, in Canada, we put a great deal of emphasis on how we do welcome immigrants. We do have programs. And if you look at just our refugee program, when we brought in refugees, the condition in which they're coming in is not optimal for and not easy for them. They're coming out of war-torn locations like Syria, for example. And in Canada, we had a private sponsorship program. So groups of Canadians would sponsor an incoming Syrian family and would support them financially and in every aspect of their life for the first year, making sure that the kids went to school, were registered, that the parents learn English and had a place to live and all of this. So we created that bond, that community, and that program was so successful. We had more sponsorship families than we had refugees coming in. I mean, it just goes to show. And so it goes to the core of how Canadians see themselves. And in Canada, and again, to Monsieur Chatillon's point on the issue of skills, in Canada, immigrants are far more likely to start a company than Canadians born in Canada. So what skill is that? Some of them only have a high school degree, but they start a small shop. They buy a franchise for Chick-fil-A or one or the other. Yes, we have Chick-fil-A in Canada now. Great success, investment success story. But so and in turn, these entrepreneurs tend to hire from their community. So if you go to a Popeye, Louisiana kitchen in Canada, you're most likely going to have an immigrant of Muslim heritage as the operator manager, and you'll probably have 80% of his staff come from that. And then you'll find out that the chicken is halal. So it takes all of that, I think, for that social cohesion to make a country work and continue to make it welcoming. But to come back, just close very quickly on what you were saying, I mean, the reason why Canada is incredibly well positioned because we, much more than the United States, have access to global markets that have where we have a preferential access. We have a free trade, more or less, agreement with the European Union, for example. So if you come and establish yourself in Canada, you have access to Europe, you have access to the United States. We're a member of the TPP, Trans-Pacific Partnership, which the United States is not yet a member of. So we're a really good place to come. We're a great platform in North America because of those access to these other markets. And just between Canada and the United States, the trade is valued to $1.7 billion a day. So that just goes to show just how incredibly envious our location is, and how much we want to keep it that way, and we intend to, because we are just today. You may be following, but the Prime Minister is in Washington meeting President Biden and the Mexican president, the first meeting of the three amigos in a long time. And that's what they're talking about. They're really talking about this incredible North America partnership, economic partnership.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Blais, and thank you, Mr. Chatillon. It was a very stimulating discussion we had with both of you. I would like to, at this time, see if the audience has any questions. I did see a question come up through the Q&A portal. This question is for Ambassador Blais. Does Canada support student loans for U.S. universities, including Georgia Tech, for Canadian citizens? Was one of the questions I got.
Other than the very specific, what might be private-based scholarship system, no. Foreign students coming into Canadian universities have to fund but you know, there's the Fulbright scholarship. There's a few scholarships that do apply in Canada, but to be honest, Canadian university students are less likely to be at university under scholarship than American students, because the cost of education is that much lower. It is actually affordable to go to university in Canada. Foreign students have to pay a higher percentage.
So the question was, does Canada also allow Canadian citizens, Canadian students to come study in the US?
Absolutely.
Programs
for
that?
Absolutely. And we have quite a few. And recently, I have a great time going from university to university down here in the Southeast and visiting with Canadian students who are here on sports scholarship. Okay. So lacrosse players, football players, rowers, swimmers. We got a lot of great Canadian talent that's down here, and then they're here on the athletic scholarship, which is not something we really have in Canada. So they come here, and in fact, at the last Olympics in Tokyo, a good number of Canadians who medaled are actually enrolled here in Canadian universities and are training down here, U.S. universities, and are training down here. And we think that's swell. It's great. They're still wearing the Canadian flag when they compete internationally. So that's all we want.
They're still doing the Canadian maple leaf. That's good.
Manjunath, I have a question.
Yes.
Okay. So, question is basically, I would like to have opinion from Philippe and Ambassador about what is their personal view on the global mobility of talent. And, in the entire 2 days, we have talked about the lack and paucity of talent in areas like cybersecurity and fintech, where these 5G technologies are coming at a rapid pace and university systems are not able to cope up in developing that kind of skill set. at a fast pace. So what is your opinion that in the coming future, 10 years, 15 years, how would we cope up with the talent, what we really need?
If I may start, and it's a personal view here, I do believe the way we look at education need to change. We still need to have a good general culture for everyone, but I do believe, in fact, that we're going to move much more on getting skill along your life. The certificate approach from university is a good demonstration how it's now sometimes even challenging some master degree, because you have through your career to learn different program. I also do believe that company has a responsibility to reskill, upskill their own population, in fact, to avoid, in fact, sometimes to do some layoff and being able, in fact, to capitalize on the knowledge which has been acquired in the company. And I'm a big in favor of mobility. You know, I'm originally from France. I'm in the United States for 20 years. I love that, but we also have to think worldwide basis. It's very important that, especially when you think about third world country or emerging country, having the ability to keep the talent in their country to develop their own, I would say, business and value, and not in fact having those large democracies sucking the resource sometimes from those countries, because that's not how we can have a balanced world. I'm not an expert in that domain, but definitively we need to help also, in fact, those countries to develop the right resource, the right level of education, so that people have a chance to grow and to have a family where they're born, where they have their heritage and their culture.
Thank you. Sure.
And since I have the floor, I just want to thank our moderator. Personally, I thought it was a wonderful conversation. I learned from both of you, and I'm very grateful. Thank you for having me.
Wonderful. Thank you for joining us, Ambassador. Thank you, Philip. Thank you, Manjunath.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Thank you all. Thank you
Look
all.
forward to staying in touch with you.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. McIntyre.